What's up, everybody? This video is so long overdue for me to make this. Matthew Stafford as Stat Padford. So this whole Matthew Stafford as Stat Padford thing got created because he racks up stats in garbage time. That's what we've been led to believe. Well, this is off of Pro Football Reference. Stafford padding stats in garbage time is not entirely true. There's instances of him doing it, but to say that he puts up these numbers just because of garbage time is absurd. This is straight off of Pro Football Reference. Matthew Stafford, in his career, has 20,487 first half passing yards, 125 first half touchdowns, and 65 first half interceptions. His second half production, Matthew Stafford has 20,120 second half passing yards, 130 second half touchdowns, and 69 second half interceptions. If he's padding stats in garbage time, how does he have more first half yards than second half yards? And the touchdowns, it's a very, very minor difference in the touchdown passes. And it gets better. Matthew Stafford has 11,450 career second quarter passing yards. And he has 68 second quarter touchdowns and 44 second quarter interceptions. However, Matthew Stafford in the fourth quarter has 11,054 passing yards, 79 passing touchdowns, and 42 interceptions. So again, if Matthew Stafford is just racking up yards in garbage time, how is the second quarter his highest yardage quarter and the fourth quarter is not his highest yardage quarter? And you can't even say, oh, the touchdowns are so much different. Of those 79 fourth quarter touchdown passes, 41 of them contributed to a win. And 8 of them contributed to the Lions taking the lead or tying the game. So that's 49 touchdowns in the fourth quarter that are not garbage time touchdowns. And that doesn't even count all the games where Stafford brought the Lions within one possession when there was still over 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. That's not garbage time. More than half of Stafford's fourth quarter touchdowns contributed to a win. That's pretty surprising to y'all, wouldn't you think? And another 8 of them contributed to the Lions either taking the lead or tying the game just for the defense to end up coughing up the lead. I'm not done. When you call Matthew Stafford Stat Padford, you really need to think about what you're saying. I'm going to show you some instances of other players padding stats by the Stat Padford logic. Kenny Golladay had a very good season in 2019. But Golladay, you only finished 3-12-1. And 8 of your touchdowns came when you were losing already. Kenny Golladay, you're just padding stats. Your stats are worthless. They're empty. You don't deserve any money, Kenny Golladay. You're a mediocre receiver. Calvin Johnson was the lone bright spot for the Lions in 2008. On a team that won 0 games, he finished 5th in the NFL in receiving yards and 1st in the NFL in touchdown receptions. But Calvin Johnson, you're just padding stats. Over 80% of your yards came when your team was losing. You suck, Megatron. Your stats are worthless. Now, this is probably my favorite one right here. Calvin Johnson in 2012 broke the NFL record for receiving yards in a single season. Everyone always says, Stafford, you had Calvin Johnson, you couldn't win jack with it. Well, Calvin Johnson, your stats are worthless. You broke the NFL receiving record. You should break the NFL receiving record when over 60% of your yards came when you were losing. You suck, Megatron. You're mediocre. You're a loser, Megatron. Stop padding stats, Megatron. Randy Moss's stats contributed to the Patriots going to the Super Bowl. Randy Moss's stats contributed to the Vikings going to the NFC Championship game. All your stats contributed to is 4-12. Your stats are worthless, Megatron. And one other thing to note. The general consensus with Calvin Johnson is that he wasted his career in Detroit. He should have gotten out of there when he had the chance. Why doesn't Matthew Stafford get that kind of respect? Because he's wasting his career in Detroit just as much as Barry Sanders did, and just as much as Calvin Johnson did, and just as much as Herman Moore did. This is another one of my favorite ones. Darius Slay was ballin' in 2017. He was tied for the league lead with interceptions and was first in passes defended. But Slay, your team had the 21st ranked scoring defense. They had the 27th ranked defense in yards allowed. Your team had the 27th ranked pass defense. Slay, your stats are worthless. It's easy to look good when you have a defense that's this bad, bro. Your stats are worthless. You're just padding stats. Your defense as a whole was garbage. And you're a garbage player on a garbage defense. You're a loser, Darius Slay. You're mediocre. Drew Brees is amazing. From 2014 to 2016, Brees was averaging over 5,000 yards a season and over 30 touchdowns a season. But over half of his yards came when he was trailing. And these 15,000 passing yards only contributed to a 21-26 record. Brees, your stats are worthless. You're just padding stats. You should get over 15,000 yards when over half of them come when you're losing. Also worth noting is that there was a 2-game stretch in 2016 where Brees had 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in games the Saints absolutely had to have. But he threw 6 interceptions and threw 0 touchdown passes. Brees, you didn't show up when your team needed you the most. All you did was pile up a bunch of meaningless stats. Rob Parker makes every excuse in the world for Aaron Rodgers. And I mean every excuse in the world. But let's talk about Aaron Rodgers in his last 2 NFC Championship games. He had 613 yards and 5 touchdowns in these last 2 NFC Championship games that he appeared in. That's pretty good. But the consensus was, oh, his defense let him down. They couldn't stop the run against the 49ers. Rodgers didn't throw a single touchdown pass until the scores were 31-0 and 27-0. Rodgers didn't have anything to do with his teams being down 4 possessions? I want to be clear. I'm not blaming Rodgers entirely for why the Packers lost the NFC Championship games. But when you get down 31-0 and 27-0, that's a complete team effort. And I remember reading a tweet where Rob Parker said they lost because they couldn't stop the run. Rob Parker, if you are going to criticize Matthew Stafford, you have to call out Aaron Rodgers, because this is the very definition of padding stats. The next season that we're going to talk about is Rodgers in 2018. Aaron Rodgers only threw 2 interceptions, and only 0.3% of his passes were picked off. That was number 1 in the NFL. Phenomenal at taking care of the football. But Rodgers, all your taking care of the football contributed to was going to 6-10. That's all it did. You're just protecting your interception numbers, Aaron Rodgers. You want to make sure that your touchdown to interception ratio remains the highest in NFL history. You're just padding stats, Aaron Rodgers. Oh, and I have to reference Rob Parker again. He said, he had a down season, but he still threw 25 touchdowns, just 2 picks. Really, bro? Really, Rob Parker? If you're going to make every excuse in the world for Aaron Rodgers like that, then why doesn't Matthew Stafford get every excuse in the world? Because Matthew Stafford has had a real rough supporting cast for the most part in his career. Even including the Calvin Johnson years, there were still holes all over the Detroit Lions roster. The last example that we're going to talk about is Russell Wilson in 2017 versus Matthew Stafford in 2016. In 2017, Russell Wilson accounted for over 80% of his team's yards. In 2016, Matthew Stafford had all those fourth quarter comebacks, and he was barely shy of accounting for over 80% of his team's yards. What's the difference between these two? Russell Wilson was praised for carrying his team, and Matthew Stafford, his fourth quarter comebacks get discredited because the Lions are always playing from behind. Oddly enough, Wilson in 2017, almost 60% of his passing yards came when the Seahawks were losing. Conversely, Matthew Stafford in the year where he had 8 fourth quarter comebacks. Only 50.1% of his yards came when his team was losing. Stafford in 2016 actually had more first half passing yards than second half passing yards. But Matthew Stafford's fourth quarter comebacks get discredited because the Lions are always playing from behind. Yet when Russell Wilson carried his team with over 80% of his team's yards, he gets praised. So Russell Wilson, you're just padding stats. You made your team have to play from behind. And this is one of the biggest differences between these seasons. Russell Wilson had the 13th ranked scoring defense and the 10th ranked defense in points allowed per drive. Matthew Stafford, on the other hand, had the 13th ranked defense in terms of scoring, but it ranked 27th in points allowed per drive. And to support how the 27th in points allowed per drive is more accurate, as of right now, no defense has given up a worse opponent completion percentage in NFL history than the 2016 Detroit Lions. So despite all that, Matthew Stafford, barely more than half of his yards came while his team was playing from behind. Conversely, Wilson, for most of the season he had a defense. Then the injuries kicked in, and I'm fully aware of that. But for probably more than half the season, he had an adequate defense. And still, almost 60% of his yards came from behind. But when Russell Wilson carries his team like that, he gets praised. And let me be clear, he should get praised. But when Matthew Stafford does it, he gets called Stat Padford. And you can't even say that, oh, his production was good for winning. No, it wasn't. The Seahawks went 9-7, one game over 500. That is the worst record that the Seahawks have had during the Russell Wilson era. So you can't say that that production was good for winning. So let me be clear. I have nothing against these football players. The point of this was more to show how stupid this nickname is and why it needs to die, and it needs to die fast. It's ignorant. There's instances of Stafford padding stats in garbage time, but it's not to the extent that it's made out to be. And again, if we're going to use that logic, Russell Wilson against the Saints earlier in 2019, the consensus was, man, he threw for over 400 yards. He had a good game. But that last touchdown he scored was literally the definition of a garbage time touchdown. It can't get more garbage time than that. There was 0 seconds left on the clock. Now again, I have nothing against Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's awesome. This video was more to put perspective on what's going on. If Stafford consistently had a defense or consistently had a run game, maybe more of his yards, maybe so many of his yards wouldn't be coming from behind. He gets criticized because he's usually the only reason the Lions are even ever in a game in the first place. Yet he gets a nickname for it. But whatever. Well, that'll be all for this video. I hope I gave a little bit of a different perspective on this stupid nickname. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed.